The easiest way to sum up self-deception is the idea that there is a part of the story that I am either not telling or refusing to acknowledge. The self-deception falls in that place where I go, I am, the one who's being wronged. I am the one who's being taken advantage of. I am the one, right? Because I'm only telling myself part of the story. And it's the part of the story that justifies that self-view of me being the person who is so mistreated and so, negatively affected by this situation. The beautiful thing about self-deception, for better or for worse, is it can affect you at home or at work equally. Right? And it's equally as insidious, and it's equally as detrimental to the value of those relationships. I would say that understanding self-deception and how I can help myself get out of it has single-handedly saved my marriage, right? My husband has a better wife because I am able to at least recognize it.
Victoria, thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
What you've done in your career, lead us through just an update of kind of how you ended up at the Arbinger Institute and maybe what led you to that. I know that you have some interesting dynamics to the early part of your career, but it's interesting for people to kind of know a little bit about you, and then we can go into what you know and how you know it, which I think will be super interesting.
Yeah, sure. So my career I think I've made a career out of being woefully unqualified for the jobs that I take. Like that, I think is just really has been a lot of it.
Yeah.
And so, if you even go back to college, right? I started college as a mechanical engineer and I finished it as a French major. Totally natural transition, right? And so I think that's kind of been the theme. And so I cut my teeth starting my career working with counterterrorism operations in particular. But a lot of it was like software design and creating a software program and a relational database tool and all of these things that I knew absolutely nothing about. But I spoke French. And that's what they needed, right? And kind of through that, I guess training in instructional design has kind of been the common thread. But towards kind of the latter half of my career, I really got into project management, program management. Not so much that I love numbers. Please don't give me a spreadsheet. Like, I'm going to fail. Don't let me balance your checkbook. None of that. I don't even know if we balance checkbooks anymore. But it's one of those things. I like people. I like people a lot. And so about 10 years ago, a colleague of mine handed me this book, Leadership and Self-Deception. And at that point in time, I was our training manager. So I was responsible for kind of codifying all of the work that we were doing that was kind of cutting edge and making it standardized so that we could then train others to do it. And he gives me this book and he says, I think you need to read it. I think it's going to be really helpful for what you're doing. And I was like, okay, whatever, books. And so I think it sat on my desk for, I don't know, like a shameful amount of time, probably a month. And then finally I got around to reading it over the course of a weekend, and I came back and I was like, that wasn't very nice. And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, I read this book and now I feel like the world's most massive jerk, because basically in the context of reading this book, I realized I am a huge problem to so many of the things that I'm trying to accomplish, right? At home, at work, all of it. And so I had been basically from that point on a client of Arbinger's. And in my most recent role before joining Arbinger, I was managing a program of about 80 folks, and it was medical, health, and wellness services. And, if ever there was an opportunity to put this stuff into practice, it was there. Because it's a whole community of people that have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and many, many years to just serve and love others, right? So, it was interesting for sure. And I had no intention of making a career jump over to Arbinger, if I'm being honest. And then basically in the course of a year, I had some really intense Arbinger coaching where I realized yet again, I was spectacularly the problem. And I said, hey, let me help other people realize this too and go on this journey with them. So that's kind of how I ended up in this role, which has been really fun.
So leadership and self-deception, you pick up the book, you read it. What do you notice about yourself in those moments? What are some of the specific things that came up when you did go back to your friend and be like, why'd you do this to me? Like that's super interesting to me. And then I think it'll lead us into what self-deception is for our listeners. If they haven't read the book, it'll encourage them to do so.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think for the most part, one of the first things I walked away with was just how quickly I can like create this whole narrative in my mind. Like there's a story in there basically about a father and a mother, and they had a newborn baby, and the baby woke up in the middle of the night and was crying. And it talks through how the dad in a moment went from I should really help my baby to well, why isn't my wife helping the baby? My wife, she's so late. Like she knows I have all of these things going on, and now she's super lazy. And it was in an instant, right? And unbeknownst to his wife. And so I was thinking through all of the different times where I had created this whole narrative in my mind from only my perspective of how this other person was the problem, and how that shaded everything that I would do or think or, see, or all the decisions that I would make. And I went, oh my gosh, how many times have I been that father? How many times have I sat there and been like, well, it's not my problem, right? Certainly not my job. It's certainly not, Woo! It was convicting, Scott. I tell you what, it was one of those things where I went back and I was like, I just, and as a wife and a mother and an employee and a manager, it was like, wow, I'm failing on all fronts. And that's what it was the panic that ensued thereafter in terms of how do I fix this, right? I mean, oh gosh, it was a humbling moment for sure.
Well, I think we all have those humbling moments, and I think I've been that father before that laid in bed and was frustrated because my wife was not working at the time, and I was working, and we were both exhausted. And you immediately start to change. By the way, that's been 18 years or more, but the
Still feel it though,
yeah,
right?
no, I mean, I think we tell ourselves lots of stories, and we have to keep ourselves away from that narrative and define that narrative. Is that the self-deception narrative? Is that really what you find yourself? For the listeners, help them understand where that lies and how we can recognize it when it starts to happen.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So I think, kind of the easiest way to sum up self-deception is the idea that there is a part of the story that I am either not telling or refusing to acknowledge, right? And so in doing so, I have created problems for others. And it's that lack of willingness to recognize it. That's really the self-deception, because you're looking now at the situation through a distorted lens. Like I'm looking at it in a way that is going to justify my behavior. So in the case of, I would be lying if I had said that I hadn't been that parent, right? The mom that was like, listen, I just created life.
Right.
And the least you could do would be get up and handle this child for 15 minutes. But it's, and it's one of those where the self-deception falls in that place where I go, I am, the one who's being wronged. I am the one who's being taken advantage of. I am the one, right? Because I'm only telling myself part of the story. And it's the part of the story that justifies that self-view of me being the person who is so mistreated and so, negatively affected by this situation that I'm refusing to accept that there's anything else out there, any remote hint of possibility, that maybe I'm also part of the problem, or certainly not contributing to things going well.
Yeah, it's the time that it takes us just to understand the other side of the story. It's sort of like when your friends get divorced, and there's always a story that goes along with it, the story that you hear from that individual, the story that other people are telling you. And it's really important when those things happen and you care about those two people that you tell yourself, you know what? I'm not inside of that marriage. I'm not inside of that story. I value the human that's on the other side, and I'm rooting for them, and I hope that they find peace in what they're looking for. And most importantly, I hope the kids are all set up and good. But the reality is, it's like the easiest thing to think about when you think that there's two sides to every story and you're not inside of that. It's something that always allows me to remember, hey, there's so much more here. And from a business standpoint, communication becomes the outlet, right? I mean, if the
Oh,
more
yeah.
you're communicating, the more you're curious, the more you're asking questions, the closer you can become to solving the biggest problems and having the greatest solutions.
Well, and I think that curiosity is key, right? Because it's very easy for me as a leader to get up here and pontificate, right? I'm communicating. But the curiosity is really where you kind of get at the crux of the matter, to the point where I can really understand what's going on from your perspective, Scott, the things, the challenges that you're running into, the needs that you have, how you're being impacted by what I do, all of that. And I think it's one of those things, the beautiful thing about self-deception, for better or for worse, is it can infect you at home or at work equally, right? And it's equally as insidious, and it's equally as detrimental to the value of those relationships, right? I would say that understanding self-deception and how I can help myself get out of it has single-handedly saved my marriage, right? My husband has a better wife because I am able to at least recognize it. I'd be lying if I said I'd never been self-deceived after like I learned about arbiter. Not possible. We're human, right?
Right.
So that self-deception angle is just kind of what we are naturally tended towards. But the fact that I can stop and go, okay, wait, hold on. Let me ask the question before I bite his head off. Like, he gets a better version of me
Yeah.
than if I didn't have that ability.
Well, I think it's there's nothing more frustrating in a relationship than when you feel like the other person just doesn't understand you and yet they know you so well. And so it's often when the other person paints you as something you're not, and it's so personal that your response is, you know, often the opposite response that you hope to. And so you get into this cycle of, so if you're going to bite your husband's head off and it's going to be about something that's so simple, like for example, you said, hey, can you just do the couple of chores? I've got to go out with the kids all day. Can you get these things done? And you walk in and you immediately bite his head off because nothing was done, yet you don't know that your daughter needed to be picked up at a certain time, and he then took her to the doctor because she cut her finger and it was deeper than you thought, and like there's this whole backstory.
Oh, yeah.
And we just don't, and that's a good version, folks. I mean, I'm giving you the really easy version. There's lots of other really stupid, simple versions that we live every day, but it is true. It's like there's so much more to the story. But when we forget that and we have no empathy, and then we paint that person as something they're not in our heads, it does make it difficult to come out of it.
Well, but and then think of the converse of that, right? Like, remember those moments when you feel like somebody did take the time to understand what was going on, or like, hey, you're kind of biting my head off. Like, what's going on? As opposed to like, why are you being such a jerk, right? Like, there's a difference even in asking the questions and getting curious, because like 9 times out of 10, I just need a snack. Like, I'm grumpy because I'm hungry, right? So, I mean, it's one of those things where I have to think about those moments when he's paused and been like, hey, what's going on? Like, is everything okay? Like, you seem stressed, right? Like, he knows it's because I bit his head off, but he's taking a moment to get curious, right? And remembering that, I think, is a lot of times where I go, hey, remember the time he gave you grace? Let's extend that in return. Right. And it's for him. It's for the people I work with. It's for my kids. Like, whoo, that I think has been a game changer. Just a moment, a pause. Because I feel like so often we're almost conditioned to react to whatever is said than taking a moment to thoughtfully respond.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about getting better at home. It's often exponential because it's the place that you're most likely to be not as good as you are when you're on at work. And so, you are at the office and you're a leader and something comes to your desk. You cannot react. You cannot, like, it just doesn't work. And if you do, you won't be a leader very long. So the reality is you have to actually respond. And so all day you do that. And so sometimes you get home and then there's a lot less of that bandwidth to respond. And so the reactions come. So when you start working on this type of stuff at home, I feel like it could be really an exponential result because it's only going to help you get better everywhere else.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think that's what like it's a great way to almost practice, right? Because it is a skill. It's not something that comes intuitively to us. Like I don't always sit there and naturally just go, well, I wonder what that person's going through. Like, no, they just cut me off in traffic. Naturally, they are wrong. I am right. And that's, we close the book on it and we go. But the more you can exercise that muscle, the better off you're going to be. You're absolutely right. I mean, it can only help whether you're working on it at work, you're working on it at home. They're going to feed into each other for sure.
Yeah, I struggle in the left lane. I mean, when people are riding in the left lane, I genuinely, it's the pass lane, the fast lane. Like, why people, I genuinely start asking, did they have a father? Did they have parents? Did they not teach them these things? And when you're on a long drive, and I spent a lot of time on the road going back and forth to watch my sons play soccer, and we travel a bit. And I feel like I'm on the road a lot, and there's nothing more frustrating than when you're riding and the ride is like you get up and you see all these people that are just backed up because one person's in the wrong lane. Oh. And so they talk about the worst time that you tell yourself a story. You're like, what is going on with this person? They got to have a clue. You get past them, you're like, come on. I mean, I know everybody feels that.
I live outside of Washington, D.C., and so the traffic that we have in this area is monumental. It is nothing but a ripe proving ground for practicing an outward mindset where I can actually think about the perspective of others, because even just in the 15-minute drive I had this morning, it was like the number of times I want to look and say, like, are you seeing the same road I'm seeing? Like, it's not great.
Are you on the Virginia side? Are you Virginia side or Maryland side?
Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I know Northern Virginia because I go back and forth. That's the drive I'm talking about. So I will tell you, I know your pain. We just drove down this weekend and we left at 6:30 in the morning, and it's 3 hours and like 18 minutes with no traffic from Northern Virginia to Virginia Beach area. Mm-hmm. And when you're driving down, all of a sudden you hit traffic at like 7 a.m. in the morning for no reason. There's nothing there. There's just 30 minutes of wasted time. And so, I could tell myself all kinds of stories. And I think in a car ride is another interesting. I had another guest on here previously, and we talked about why couples argue so much in the car. And a lot of it has to do with our body facing direction. Like you're at your best where you're one-on-one facing each other. Mm-hmm. But when you're actually looking opposite directions or forward and not towards each other, little things kind of start to bug you in a different way. And so like in a car ride, you could have like the most in-depth conversation. You could have the most loving and concerning conversations. And then 5 seconds in, someone could adjust the air conditioner and it could be like all hell breaks loose. So, you want to get
Cars
close
are
to
treacherous places.
Yeah, they're treacherous. A great place for self-deception.
Oh, isn't that the truth? Good grief.
Tell me about the 4th edition. This is a book that's had great success.
Yeah.
It's been highly successful. I've known so many people who have found this book to be life-changing. Walk me through the rebirth and the rejuvenation when we do a 4th edition. What are some of the things that people should be aware of?
Yeah, I was really excited that we decided to do a 4th edition because, admittedly, the world has changed a lot since the 3rd edition came out. And so in this 4th edition, really what we were focusing on was making sure it was still current, right? The concepts are timeless in a lot of ways, but the context in which they're presented, we wanted to make sure that they were relevant. And so one of the things that really resonated with me in particular is that we provided a different perspective of what it looks like to be inward. And when we say inward, we mean that I'm looking at myself as the hero of my own story, right? I'm more important than others, and others don't matter like I matter. And so, we had traditionally in the 3rd version, we had looked at it as kind of from a better than angle. I'm better than everybody else, and that's why their opinions don't matter. And so it was, it created this kind of distance. In this new 4th version, we look at it actually from 2 perspectives. One being the kind of what we call the better than, but the other one being the worse than, where like, hey, I don't know as much as this person does. So, or, I've never had the opportunities that they have. So of course I wouldn't be able to do it like they do it. Right. And so we look at it from a little bit different perspective, which I think is really valuable. we also kind of dig a little bit deeper into some of these concepts, which I think are really great. We had, previously had some language in there about being in the box, and that was something that people struggled with. And so instead, we were talking more about inwardness, because it's something where it's not necessarily a binary state, right? I'm not in the box or out of the box. It's kind of a continuum of inwardness, right? Where it's self-focused, to outwardness, where it's not just putting other people first, it's taking into account my impact on others. And so, using that language to kind of, provide a frame of reference, I think has been really great. I also just like the stories that we've got. We've kind of fine-tuned them a little bit in this newest version, which has been really, I don't know, really fun to read, really fun to see. Like, I was so excited waiting for it to come out, like, in hard copy, because I'm a paper book kind of girl.
Yeah.
So, the fact that it launches, for real on August 27th, it's like,
Yeah, and it's funny because maybe it's also generational. I fully understood in the box, out of the box. Like, to me, in the box means when I've always found that when I'm in the box, not just personally, but just in general, in anything, in business, for example, there are so many business. Let's say you're in the finance world where I've spent most of my career. When I get outside the box and I talk to people in other industries, there are so many things they do every day that could be reciprocated in my industry that I've never thought to execute. And I found my best ideas from talking to people and working with people that have no experience in my space at all. And vice versa. Sometimes we've solved things in our space that no one's ever solved. And so when you start to execute those ideas across, a personal perspective, and you think about that diversity of opinion, diversity of thought, it's so powerful. And so I could see how inward and outward makes more sense today. And I also fully understand the continuum. So I think it's an update that's valuable, but I always related to in the box and out of the box.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing I like about it, we talk about kind of when you are inward, you're looking through a lens, right? So the box can kind of create that construct of like, you're not really seeing things clearly. But, the way that someone explained it to me is like, if you think of inwardness as like, when you put on glasses, but you don't need glasses and everything gets really blurry. And so it's the degree to which the optometrist has shifted those lenses and things are becoming increasingly clear. And so, it's one of those where in the course of a day, I feel like I can run the continuum end to end.
Yeah.
And that may be just before lunch, right? So, I mean, it's just one of those things where I think it was really valuable. And I liked that we brought a female character in play as one of the protagonists to really kind of talk through it, because there's a lot that's happened just in terms of gender roles and dynamics and all of that, in the last, 5-6 years, all of that. So, I mean,
yeah,
it's exciting. Everybody should go get it.
Yeah, that is true. And I think it's funny. A lot of the old business books were just male characters as well. And so it's very normal to see that. And I think that I'm not against men in any way. I'm not against the old books that did great stuff and used them as characters. But I also do like to see the updates, and I don't have any daughters, but I have nieces, and it's nice to see yourself in a story. Yeah. So there is some value to just quick little updates that make things better.
I think representation is huge, right? So whether it be, from a gender dynamic or race dynamic, whatever that looks like, I think representation is huge. So I was really glad to see that we addressed that and we were able to get that updated and just make it. Really, the whole mission is for us to make this work accessible and relatable. And to the extent that we can remove some barriers in order to make that happen, it's all the better, right? I mean, we really just want to help people turn the world outward, right? I mean,
right.
That's it.
So many of our listeners are high performers, and we use the term loosely because, the high performer could be the working mom who comes home and does everything around the house on top of everything at the office. It could be the father who is, handling the CEO operation at the office and then taking their kids to every practice and then coming home and helping to make dinner. And everybody feels like they have so much on their plate. What are some of the ways that this book, that these teachings can help high performers be more aware? Because I think so many high performers pride themselves on awareness. In fact, I think that's how they got there. A lot of them get there through this high frequency awareness, but they're always striving to be better. And everybody that listens to this show is striving to be just a little bit better every day.
Yeah. I would say, I think the biggest thing that I've seen just personally is the power of getting curious. So even if I think I know what my impact is on somebody, just asking the question, hey, I find it especially with making changes, right? So I'm trying to think of I feel like I have so many examples and I'm trying not to dime out my family, Scott.
Well, you can, this is a personal show. It's called the High Performance Life. It's not called the High Performance Profession. So you talk about whatever you want to talk about. Just remember, I prefer not to edit it. So give me the good stuff, but don't make it too much.
But so, I mean, a perfect example. So my daughter, she is 11, about to be 12. And so we are living that tween life, all things Taylor Swift all the time.
Yeah.
And she had asked she went away to camp for 3 weeks. It was a big deal. And she had asked for a room makeover, right? And so I had all of these inspiration pages that she had sent, all of these boards, all of these things. And so I had gone through and I had painted the room. I had gotten new bedding, new drapes, all of this kind of stuff. And then I had put all of her, she's into vinyls because apparently that's coming back. I'm here for it. So she had vinyls up on the wall. I put a whole bunch of her posters up on the wall, all this stuff done. And she walks in and she goes, so you already did everything? Yeah, kid, I did, because you asked me for a room makeover, so I did a room makeover, and you gave me all the inspiration boards, so I did everything. And she went, I really appreciate it, Mommy. I would have loved if we could have done some of it together. If I had bothered to ask the one question, hey, kiddo, I got this. Is there any part of this that you want to be a part of? Because I know my kid's love language is quality time. Is there any part of this that you'd like us to do together? If I had just waited, I feel like we could have had an amazing moment. Now, my kid extends far more grace than she should at her age. And she's like, but you know what, Mommy, I really appreciate them. This is wonderful. And maybe we could do some other things together to add on the walls and all of that. But it was just taking half a beat to think and going, I know my kid and I know what she really values. And as much as she wants this, there's probably some element to which she would like to participate so we can do it together as a mother-daughter team. I was like, man, swing and a miss, Mom. But,
yeah.
It's lesson learned, right? So, now she wants, I don't know, we're redoing a school wardrobe or something like that. I don't know what's happening. But my first thought was, do you want to do it together? Or is this something where I have liberty to go do what I want to do?
You learned. You're results oriented and you were focused on getting it done and giving her the result. Yeah. And she wanted to enjoy the process a little bit. And I had a humbling experience similar where my now college son was maybe a year ago, and he was 17, 18 years old, and we were considering going to a Dallas Cowboys game in Dallas, and I kind of knew that we were going to go, but I didn't want to tell him right away because the schedule had been crazy. I wasn't sure if everything was locked in. And so I was trying to control all the uncontrollable items. And he goes, Dad, are we going to the game or not? I was like, I'll make sure that you go. If we can go, we'll go. And he stops me and he said, Dad, you do a lot of things. I don't do as many as those things as you do. And I know you're busy and I know you travel a lot, but this is a big deal to me. And I look forward to it. And I really would like to look forward to it. You're taking away my ability to look forward to it because you can't handle it mentally because it's too much in your world. But I need you to tell me we're going or we're not going so I can look forward to it.
I love that, though. Yeah. Way to go.
Yeah, no, it was good. It was good. It was really good because my way of dealing with being overly scheduled and busy and traveling is to not look too far ahead because it's overwhelming when I look too far ahead. So my coping mechanism in my life, in my world, in my box, was keeping him from something that he really enjoys. And so, you know, I definitely learned from that. And I immediately was like, yeah, we're going. He was like, well, that was really simple. Why couldn't you have just told me that?
But I mean, I think what's so interesting in both of these, right? Like, it was a little thing had a huge impact on him, right? A little, yeah, we're going, made a huge difference for him, and which is arguably minimal effort on your part, right? And I could have stopped 3 days before I did, thereby requiring less effort of me to have more impact for her. Right. And so, like, I think in both instances, it's interesting how something with either like less effort or minimal effort can have such a substantial impact so long as we understand what that impact is going to be. And that's really what comes down to, like, your son bringing it to your attention and my daughter bringing it to mine. Whereas in both cases, we could have just asked the question, right? Like, that's where it's like,
and
just getting curious.
Even letting people know along the way when you're doing something. Sometimes we get into our own space and we just start doing stuff. And I can't tell you how many times I've come home where my wife has done something that she thought was helping me, and it's the exact opposite result of something that I was hoping to do. Or maybe it wasn't the reason I wanted to do it, but she did it and it didn't get, and there's these variables, right? And all of a sudden I'm like, well, I didn't want to do it that way. Why don't you just tell me you were going to start it? I could have told you right away, don't do that. Let's wait till we have these things. And the reality is it's both of us. It's me not communicating properly what I wanted and why I wanted it. I'm only giving part of the story. And then her just trying to succeed and get it done to help without actually asking questions or giving us that stuff along the way. And so it's in relationships, it's really fun, because you make these mistakes over and over again, but hopefully you're learning a little bit more. Like you said, your husband's getting a better version of you today than he got 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and I think that's perpetually the peril of high performers, right? We're always looking to do more or be more effective. And sometimes we can do that at the expense of the impact that it takes on others, right? Like, I spectacularly shrunk my husband's golf shirts because I didn't realize that they weren't supposed to be dried because they're boy clothes. Boy clothes go in the dryer. And I thought I was being helpful. And then he came out with a bunch of crop tops. So that wasn't going to work out so well at all. But
well, you're speaking my story, because I think I don't have hardly any shirts that Adrian has not shrunk in my house, to the point where I have to give them. One of my buddies is a 5'3" Honduran who I played soccer with most of my life. He's a great friend. He literally gets like 4 or 5 shirts from me every 6 months, because there's been a shrunken incident where, and my pants, you know, these Lululemon pants, you can't throw them in the dryer. They start to inch up, and that might look cute on a woman. Doesn't look cute on a man. Doesn't
not
look
the
cute.
Objective. Not the objective.
So I've been there and done that and lived it. But you were trying to help,
right?
And it's so then how he responds is the other portion where that could be challenging, and it's just stuff and it's just a shirt. I was listening to something this morning in my scripture readings, and then I was listening to like an update, like I'm stuttering a bunch. I'm sorry to everyone listening. I don't normally stutter this often, but I was trying to like get my thoughts together. But I was listening to just an interpretation of the reading, and it was talking about how many times kids do something that they make a mistake of nothingness, but in the moment it's the most substantial thing. So kids setting the table, and they break a glass because they're like just slamming them down, and the parent gets super angry or frustrated at the fact that they were moving too fast and at doing the very things that we do every day, but we just know that a glass breaks when we slam it down. And we're giving them the wrong perspective, because literally the stuff is not worth anywhere near as much as they are. And for someone like me, who definitely is a little edgy and high intensity, I know, now my son's never broke a glass on the table, but I got upset about lots of other stupid things that just didn't matter. And you really recognize it, and it hits you super hard when you look back and they're gone and they're out of the house, and you remember those moments. You're like, no, they mean way more to me than that. And so sometimes just being aware enough, having that pause, is so valuable to everything, because it will only allow us to be that better version. High performers need it because we move so fast anyway. We're more likely to slam the glass down and break it moving through the kitchen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like my 4-year-old is the greatest reflection of my behavior, for better or for worse, because we're now in parrot mode, meaning anything that I say will inevitably come out of his mouth. And so that, for me, that has been the easiest way for me to recognize my impact on him. When he says something, Mommy, that was so careless.
Where'd you get that? Yeah.
But was it? At which point I go, well, what did I tell him that was so careless? And was it? Like, it's just, I think children are so amazing in terms of their ability to kind of constantly educate us, for better or for worse, as much as we're raising them. But yeah, I hear you.
if we're open to it, I think that it takes, it's all perspective. It's sometimes we have too much of a perspective on the present, where when they're growing up, that we want to keep them young. And if we do that, then we don't allow them to grow up and become what they're supposed to be. And at the same time, if we're pushing for them to be older and grown all the time, when they get there, you really, really miss some of the most important present moments. And so being a parent is imperfect, and it's super hard, but we're all just out there doing the best that we can. And when they parrot us, not parent, and just respond in the way that we do. My 4-year-old nephew is going to play t-ball, and he got a little baseball bat and a ball, and he was watching some older kids, and they were hitting the ball, and one kid hit the ball really hard, and my niece told me, she goes, I heard him go, damn. And she said, probably not what I want my 4-year-old son to be saying, but it was just a great example, another small example of even our little responses are so important.
Well, I mean, and you think if kids reflect it so genuinely, right, without filter, think of how much adults are recognizing and responding to it, but just choosing not to react, right? And how that then colors every interaction that you have with them from here on out. Because if I'm this, raging mom monster, and people are observing that and they're going, oh, I don't want to deal with that lady. Like, that then colors every interaction that they're going to have with me. Or if I'm passive aggressive, or if I'm just one of those people that sits back and is like, yeah, okay, keep talking. Like, it doesn't even have to be extreme. So I just, I love my kids. They keep me so honest. Way more so than I had ever thought was going to be possible.
Is your 4-year-old your youngest?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you're kind of and your oldest is how old?
21.
Okay.
So we run the gamut.
So you're going through this in a way where you have fresh eyes.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it's amazing, too, right? Like, kid after kid, you just you learn something new and different. You figure your kids get a different version of you along the way, right? Because the person I was when I had my 11-year-old is not the person I was when I had my 4-year-old, and how that experience then shapes the way that I parent them. And you figure my husband's going through the same thing, right? Like, he's a different person from when our 4-year-old was born to now. So I think, it's such, the mantle of parenthood is a heavy one to carry. Everybody talks about the mantle of leadership. You're leading a household, right? I mean, it is that kind of thing, and you're leading your family, and you're leading your spouse, and certainly in the Christian context, there's that as well. That mantle of leadership, it's a heavy one.
Yeah.
And wherever it shows up, it's just it's heavy.
The thing is that. First of all, I completely understand. My little brother is 13 years, almost 14 years younger than me and my sister. is only 2 years younger than I am. So my sister and I grew up in a house where, my parents were super young, sometimes very financially strapped and stressed, and it was a different environment. My brother came into the world, and we were probably at like our point where, I'm 13, almost in freshman in high school. My sister's 11 or 12. Like, it's not the best representation, of the times where you're the most caring and thoughtful. And he comes into the world and kind of unites everybody because it's a baby in the space. And so you probably saw this with your 4-year-old, how there could be all this chaos, and life comes in and changes it. And we were talking a while back, and I had someone on my show that talked about premenopause and menopause, and her and I were talking about the male perspective, the female. Of course, men, we don't go through this, but we might experience it in other ways because our spouse is going through it. And my mom and I had this conversation, and she says to me, she goes, it's funny, you and your sister got a different version of me than your brother, because I was definitely going through a lot at the time that I was raising your brother. And so there was a lot more bickering, a lot more little things that we go through. Like, we're just marriage, it's natural. But it was definitely interesting to listen to, because I always thought in my brain, wow, this guy grew up in a completely different environment. He had the cakewalk, and, they went on vacation, like a real vacation. I don't remember, and I always give him crap about it, but we all have our own version of our families, and we all do as parents the best that we can. That's really all we can do. And hopefully the kids read a great book like Leadership and Self-Deception, and they start to understand that they too can control, and at least not control, but at least be aware of some of these other things that get better than their parents are. And then they can raise their kids in a much, much different way.
I think a lot of what we talk about at home is our kids, we don't talk about necessarily inward versus outward, but we talk about understanding your impact on others, right? If you make a decision to do this, what's the impact and who does it affect? And just starting to orient them at a young age of how their decisions will impact others has radically changed the way that our kids engage with the world. Like, and are they perfect? Of course not, because they're kids, right? I'm an adult and I'm definitely not perfect. And so, but just even that, right? That it's in a culture that can so often be about self-help and self-focus and self, having our kids just, even for a moment, go, what must it be like for that person? What must it be like to have to deal with that? Or what must it be like, to have to respond to that or have to exist in that? I mean, you figure for our family, so we're a blended multiracial family. In the wake of all of the social justice movements, we had to have some really hard conversations, because you figure our 21-year-old is biracial, our 11-year-old is a white Latina, our other now 11-year-old is African American, and our 4-year-old is biracial. We run the gamut, right? And so having to talk to each of them in such a way to understand, well, what must it be like for, this community right now? What must it be like? Just, and not even necessarily presenting one as the right opinion or the wrong opinion, but like just encouraging them to get curious. They come home now with stories from school. They're like, yeah, man, it was really interesting learning about, so-and-so's background, because we live in a really diverse area. I mean, we're in Northern Virginia. DC is such a transient area, and we have so many nations and cultures represented. But just to like cultivate curiosity in children, oh my gosh, I'm learning so much from them every day. It's great.
Yeah. The best way to teach people the differences are amazing is to go to different restaurants and to eat different foods. I read in your bio how much you love food.
Ooh, preach it, Scott.
You want to actually understand, like, we go from Virginia Beach to Northern Virginia, and my favorite thing about going up to Northern Virginia is the fact that the Indian food is so good, or there are Latina restaurants everywhere that you can grab, some of the best Spanish food from all different El Salvadorian and
Yep.
over here is Honduran,
Yeah.
and absolutely love it.
Yeah.
So it is a really good. I mean, and my son plays soccer, and he's one of the only white kids on the team.
Hmm.
And so what that means is all the food diversity he's getting, all I'm saying food diversity. He's getting a lot more than food diversity, but I'm just
Sure.
saying that there are things that kids really relate to just like we do. Like growing up, I grew up in a Catholic, Italian Catholic family, big food. All of my friends in Catholic school, almost all of them were Filipino. I would go to their
Interesting.
house and we would eat so many amazing things. To this day,
Mm.
I seek out the Filipino restaurants because I grew up with it. And so, it's really a unique perspective, but I think it's a great perspective. And if we lead with food, everything's better.
Facts. Facts. When we talk about experiencing culture and community through food, that is kind of the Trammel way in our household. And so, absolutely. I would take pancit and some lumpia any day of the week.
Oh,
So,
yeah, you can go to the bank with that. When you talk about diversity, your kids can also learn that when you go to how do I say this on a podcast without being offensive to anybody? I'm not going to be offensive because I'm not meaning to be offensive. When we would go to ethnic families, my mom would know I was going to be fed a full lunch or a full dinner with dessert as the side. But dinner was the main objective. So I would go and they'd lay out all the food in the Italian family or the Spanish family or the Filipino family. And I'd be in the kitchen with grandma eating lumpia and pancit. I'll be the only one at the table. And if we were going to a less ethnic family's house, my mom would feed me before I left because she's like, they're not going to have anything but cupcakes. It's going to be cupcakes and junk food. And so I would eat lunch and we get there. I remember being a kid going, man, she always knows. It's amazing. She always knows we're going to have either way too much food or way too little food. So that's how I learned the benefits of diversity at a young age by food was
I mean,
I
listen,
full?
there's so much that can be learned. I mean, we love it because you can experience so much culture through a meal. I think it's fantastic. But
Yeah.
you got to be willing to be a little bit uncomfortable and get really curious. And I think that that's just kind of a recipe for success in a lot of ways if you're willing to go there.
Well, it goes back to your number one objective, which is getting more curious. If you're getting more curious, it requires taking chances, asking questions you wouldn't normally ask, being curious with empathy. These are things that are all when you taste the food at someone's table, there are lots of times you're going to go, man, I don't know what I'm eating right now, but it is good. Or maybe you don't like it, and that's okay too. But at least you're trying things, and it's opening up your mind and that perspective, which really helps you in anything that you're doing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's the perfect analogy, right? Because getting curious doesn't necessarily mean you're going to agree with that person. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to like the food, right? But it's a way to understand a perspective and be like, man, okay, well, Barracuda wasn't right up my alley in terms of what I wanted to eat, but I get it because it's local and it's something that's convenient and you all consider it a delicacy and it's something that, is honoring to me that you're allowing me to partake in this meal. And you know what I mean? Like there's so much context and richness in that context that we can get from just getting curious, not at all having to agree.
So as a foodie, as someone so what's the best restaurant? Like, what do you love to eat? Is there something that
That's like asking me who my favorite child is. Like I can't.
you don't have a favorite restaurant? What are the spots? If someone's coming to the greater DC area, Northern Virginia, where do they have to go? Is there anywhere that people have to go that maybe they don't know about?
See, so it depends upon the cuisine that you're going for.
Okay.
So like Ciao Osteria, which is in Centerville, Virginia, has some of the best Italian food that I've had since we came back from Italy. Like it is legit. The chef is Sicilian. They flew in their brick pizza oven from Naples. Like, I mean, it's like legit. It's amazing. There's a couple pupuserias around here. So like if you want some pupusas, there's like Pupusas Express is one of my favorites. There's Tu Amigos, which is over here. That's also very good. Like there's so much good Latin food,
Okay.
and you can
Yeah.
pick, where you want to go. And then if you want, like, there's really good Korean food also in Centerville because there's a large Korean community. So there's like a whole Japanese Korean like market where you have a whole bunch of different vendors that you can go in. And see, now I'm getting hungry.
Yeah, it's
So,
awesome.
Scott,
Yeah,
come
but it's
on.
good. It's you know what I think it's the kind of thing that's worth talking about because these are the things that I like to know. Like I literally wake up and there's an Instagram reel that I saw recently or some kind of post and it was you're Italian when you're sitting having breakfast and everybody has like a bubble above them. Like I wonder what's for dinner. Everybody's already planning dinner before. Like I certainly, live to eat. And so it's a big, big difference. And I think that's a way of life. And, I think it's great that we teach our kids that. I think as long as we know we can go without it. I've
Yeah.
learned as I got older that I can handle it now. But I do think the analogies are great. And that's why we were talking about food, folks. We bring it back to leadership, to self-deception, to all these things. We can bring it back to food. So when can people order the book? What do they need to do? It's only a couple of days now before the fourth edition
Yeah.
comes out. They have to wait till the new one comes out so they
Yeah,
can order it on
definitely wait.
Amazon. Where do they get it?
Yeah,
Everywhere.
so I was going to say you can pre-order now. It launches officially on August 27th. Amazon is kind of the easiest way to do it. Barnes and Noble. I think there's going to be a Kindle version coming out if you're an e-reader type. But definitely go out there and get it. It's a great read. It's something, if you want a beach read or if you want a poolside read or whatever that is in the tail end of summer, it's great. You can do it, knock it out in just a couple hours. So highly recommend it.
All so that you can work on being a better version of yourself tomorrow.
Absolutely.
The imperfect self, we all are it, so it's fine. It's been an honor to have you, Victoria. It's awesome to talk through food and self-deception and leadership and all the things that we've got on the plate today.
Great. Thanks so much, Scott, for having me. It's been fun.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you liked it, there's more where this one came from. Click here and enjoy some more.